I want to tell the story of what is probably the most dangerous and the scariest travel experience I've ever had. A few years ago, my mom, myself, and my brother David went on a weekend trip to Benin Republic, or as we say here, Benin Republic. And we stayed at this really nice resort called Casa del Papa, which is located in the Ouida area of Benin. And to give you a bit more of an idea of what this place looks like, just imagine you are at a beach. The whole area is just beach sand and palm trees and the Atlantic Ocean on one side. There were no tarred roads leading up to the resort, just thick beach sand. A normal car wouldn't be able to drive on those roads, if you want to call it a road. You would need to have a Jeep or a truck or a motorcycle. The cheapest option for us to get to the resort and move around if we wanted to was a motorcycle. So on the second day of our trip, we had a few activities planned. We wanted to do some kayaking and we wanted to also visit the Door of No Return. And if you're not familiar with the concept of the Door of No Return, that is basically a point on West African coastal countries where slaves were once taken from Africa to the Americas. It was the loading point where they would put slaves onto the ships. And as a slave, if you got onto the ship from that point, you were not going to see Africa again. So that's why it's called the Door of No Return. Shortly after kayaking, before we made our way to the Door of No Return, it began to rain heavily. Like, this is probably the most intense thunderstorm I've ever seen in my life. I've never seen rain this heavy before. And you can imagine, if you're by the ocean, there's something so beautifully apocalyptic about just the gray clouds and how close the clouds are to the water and the raging seas and just the thunder, the lightning. It's such a beautiful thing to see. It's scary, but it's also really cool to see. So after the rain subsided, 2 motorcycles came to us, and the plan was for my mom to go on one with the driver, and the second one was for my brother and I. So it was the driver and then my brother, and I was behind, and we were supposed to hold on. If you've ridden one of these before with the driver in front, then you know how it is. The whole experience of just riding through this area on motorcycle was amazing. Like, you just had palm trees on both sides, you had thick sand, you could literally feel as you were moving constantly, and you have the ocean on this side and just the wind, and you can taste the salt in the air, and you can just feel like the ocean sprinkles on you. Honestly, looking back, it is probably one of the moments in my life where I felt the most alive. I just felt like this was where I wanted to be. Like, this was the essence of simple, pure African living. About halfway through our journey on motorcycle, it started to rain a bit again, but not as heavily as it was before. And there was this car in front of us that was carrying a lot of goods, and the car had gotten stuck in the sand. So we got off the motorcycle and we had to help the guy basically lift his car out of the sandy, muddy area. And I don't know, for me it felt nice, you know, like I felt like I was one of the locals, just doing things locals do. So everything was going very well. I thought I was getting a nice cultural immersion experience. And we finally got the guy's car out of the sand and he went on his way. He was very thankful. By this time, my mom had already gone way ahead of us and we were a bit behind. So we got on the bikes and the driver started to pick up the pace to catch up. As we were going, the driver started speeding a lot. And there were a few times where I felt like we were going to fall because there were a lot of hard bumps on the way. So I told him, like, please just take it easy, just calm down from here. And I was speaking French. I don't even know if it made sense, but I felt like he kind of understood what I was saying at the time. So he listened, but a few minutes later, he started speeding again. But at the time, I think I was just so mesmerized by our surroundings. I was looking around while still trying to hold on and maintain a good level of support. And before I knew it, we went over this hard bump and I just remember myself screaming and just rolling on the floor. We had literally flown off the motorcycle and I ended up maybe about, no exaggeration, 15 to 20 feet away from the motorcycle. It was kind of just a blur. Like, one moment we were on the motorcycle and the next moment we were in the air and I was just rolling on the floor uncontrollably. And so when I stopped rolling, I quickly got up because I wanted to check and make sure my brother was fine. And it didn't seem like he had rolled too far. He was pretty close to the bike. So I got up to make sure he was fine and he didn't seem to be in any trouble. And so I dusted myself off, and when I looked down, I just see this huge, ugly looking scar on his leg. And what I think had happened was that as we were falling off the motorcycle, his leg might have been a bit too close to the exhaust, so it burned off the skin. And I was just like, oh my goodness, what is this? I only had like a few cuts and scrapes here and there, nothing serious, but I looked on that injury and I was just so upset at the whole situation. And the driver was still on the motorcycle, just like in shock, looking back. And I'm like, bro, what do you mean? Like, do something. But he just didn't know what to do. So we were there and just trying to get our bearings, and it started to rain heavily again. So if you can imagine having open wounds and then rainwater and then sand just mixing in with your wound, it's a bit graphic, I know, but this is just what we were experiencing at the time. But what I'm so thankful for was that we fell on sand and not concrete. And also the fact that we fell sideways and not like tumbling or something like that, because it could have been much, much worse. Apparently another motorcycle driver had witnessed the whole thing, and so he came to us and the driver and wanted to help. And I'm not sure, but I feel like this is what the locals do when people sustain wounds. He basically advised the driver to take some engine oil from the bike and apply it on my brother's leg, I'm guessing to kind of close up the wound. And this is where I lost it. I was like screaming in French. I don't even know if it made sense, but I was just losing my mind. I was like, do not touch him, like just don't do anything, let's just go catch up with my mom and just take it from there. I was livid because I'm like, how are you about to put engine oil to close a wound? Like, what? I think he was a bit shocked with how much I was yelling, so he quickly put the engine oil back into the compartment and we just got on the bike and we were just just quiet the whole ride. I think all the adrenaline and just the shock and just, I don't know, like it was a very weird situation. A few minutes later, we caught up with my mom and her motorcycle driver. They had actually stopped at this hut by the side of the road because the rain was so heavy and they couldn't go on. So you can imagine how upset and just like horrified she was to see the state we were in and our injuries. And she really let the driver have it. And also her motorcycle driver joined her to attack our driver. Like, what were you doing? Like, why weren't you careful? And the poor guy was just speechless, but I was so upset at the whole situation. I wasn't even sure who to be angry at, but I was just so irritated about the whole thing. Now, in that hut where my mom and her motorcycle driver had stopped, that was actually where a lot of the women who were doing the fishing, they were taking the fish that they had caught from the ocean and were dragging them in their boats to the hut. And they wanted to take some shelter from the rain. And so they were around when all of this like shouting and confusion had happened, and they saw the state my brother and I were in, soaked and just like sandy, bloody, all of that. And they were so kind to they had the wrappers that they were wearing, they were so kind to take them off and just wipe us down with them and cover our heads so that the rain wouldn't get to us, which was a very beautiful, lovely gesture, honestly. But if you know how raw fish smells, and you can imagine that these ladies had been fishing the whole day and were actually storing some of the fish on their wrappers, you know how disgusting the whole atmosphere was. I appreciated the kind gesture, but I was even more irritated because we smelled like raw fish now. The wounds are stinging, the pain is beginning to set in, it's raining. After the rain had subsided, the motorcycle drivers took us to the nearest hospital, and it was a very bare bones hospital. I don't even think there were any patients or any staff actually, but there was one doctor who came to attend to us, and I don't remember if we took any injections, but I feel like we were supposed to take the tetanus injection just to prevent against any infections that could occur. And the doctor took a look at our wounds and just cleaned them up, disinfected them, and put some bandages on us, and we made it back to the resort. So in the end, a day that was supposed to be fun and full of good memories just took a completely sour turn. But you know, in all of this, I can't help but remember the kindness of the fisherwomen in the huts, who, even though we were tourists, it didn't matter to them. All they saw were human beings who needed help and just needed to be attended to immediately. And they just did what they could with the little that they could offer at the moment. And even though it was a very irritating situation with just being wet and covered in raw fish, at the end of the day, the thought is what counts. And for me, that was what shone through this whole experience. That was the silver lining of this whole unfortunate thing, was that these women, who we couldn't even communicate with them, by the way, because we didn't speak their language, they didn't speak any French, they only spoke the local language in that area. They just did what they had to do to make sure we were fine. And that's something that I would never forget, because it just reinforced how important it is to be kind to people. So with all the crap that happened this day, it wasn't all doom and gloom, because the kindness of strangers was what stood out regardless. So yeah, that was the story I wanted to share. It's kind of a wild one actually. But looking back now with all of our scrapes and bruises from that accident, it's just a reminder of that crazy adventure, and it makes for a good story. And the important thing is that we're alive and that we're well and we have the story to tell. I will end by saying that I absolutely loved our time at the resort. It was just amazing to be by the beach for the whole weekend. And the people of Benin were very hospitable, very nice, as I've demonstrated in this story. And I'm hoping that the next time I go there, we can make some new memories to kind of get rid of these ones. But all in all, no memory is wasted. We just added to the collection of crazy travel memories. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.